timing cues.
Yes. Our
Good to hear.
If you're watching this, that must mean that you're ready to start the process of applying for DC-based unemployment benefits. This short video will give you the overview of what you need to do and some very key things to keep in mind throughout the process. So, first things first, let's talk about eligibility. To qualify for unemployment insurance benefits in DC, you must have earned enough income in the recent past, be unemployed through no fault of your own, be able and available to work, and actively searching for work during your benefits period. Also, if you filed a claim in another state, you may not be eligible for benefits. Before you start your claim, we've got a handy tool on our website that can help you estimate your weekly benefit amount. Just enter your gross earnings from each quarter of your base period, and the tool will calculate the rest for you. Keep in mind that you can only file your claim online at dcnetworks.org. Once you're there, just click on Register for an account, and we'll ask you a few questions to help determine your eligibility. Be sure to take your time and enter accurate information so we can process your claim as smoothly as possible. Within 7 days, you'll receive a monetary determination letter that states your wages from the past year and whether you've been declared monetarily eligible. So, you've submitted your claim, but you're not quite done. While you wait for your monetary determination letter, be sure to read our Claimant Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. It'll help you understand what to expect and avoid any accidental fraud. Also, keep an eye out on your mail and email for communications from us. We might need more information from you, and there are usually deadlines that you'll need to meet. And don't forget about weekly certifications. You already filed your first one as a part of your application process, but you'll need to file one every week to stay eligible for benefits. You'll need to confirm that you're actively seeking work and willing to accept any reasonable job offers. Remember, just because you're monetarily eligible doesn't mean you're eligible for benefits. We'll still need to evaluate your reason for separation and make a determination within 21 days. If you're approved, great! You'll receive your first payment within 21 days. Keep filing your weekly certifications throughout your 26-week benefits period, and you'll be all set. But if you're denied, you can file an appeal with the Office of Administrative Hearings within 15 days of the mail date. Okay, so that was a lot of information, but don't worry, we're here to help you through the process. We've created a very simple outline that will guide you through the process with an easy step-by-step checklist that you can find on the website, dcnetworks.org. And as always, if you have any questions or encounter any issues, just give us a call or shoot us an email.
Oh, yeah.
I never liked that. Oh, I'm an artist. You know what? I'm a fighter. I think I'm a fighter.
Probably 7, 8 years old. I got a little transistor radio. Every night in bed, I would just cut it on real low, and I saw my mom's light go out. Cut it on real low and just be listening, man. And the music, I mean, it just took hold of me. Looking back now, I knew then that that music would be the soundtrack to my life.
With this grant, I could really do exactly the project that I had in mind. And I worked with that grant for a year. I wanted to do a workshop where these women felt, the space to really share their stories.
But I really didn't start believing that I could be a professional artist until I went to my high school, Duke Ellington School of the Arts.
I was doing installations, really kicking off my career. Then COVID happened and it kind of shut everything down.
I would go from a bilingual school in the daytime to being in a very Asian household in the evening. And so there were all these different cultural voices happening. And so what I realized was that movement was going to be this really universal language that everyone understood.
And so I realized that I could use the music as a springboard to do the work that I wanted to do in education, in the community.
It forced me to look at the community that's in DC and not thinking so much of, I have to be in the industry out there, but what do I have at home?
The Commission on Arts and Humanities was critical in helping me pivot from being a nonprofit executive to a full-time creative. I loved having that job. It was meaningful work. It is nowhere near as fulfilling as doing what you feel like you were put on this earth to do, though.
That was the first time I saw those connections of my creative work, entrepreneurship, activism, education, all the things that I love in this one piece. So from there, it was like, oh, there's no turning back. I have to continue to develop my own work.
Because these women, what they want is for us to listen to their stories. And then at the end, when they finish, they told me it's the first time that I share my story with someone. And imagine, that's the power of art.
The Commission of Arts and Humanities really stepped in. They had the relief grant for artists like me that were in these crucial situations where we needed just assistance to be.
It means a lot that I'm from a city that cares so much about their artists.
And I can now see that full cycle of having been a young dancer.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2024 DC Fair Election Program General Debate for at-large member of the DC Council. I'm Michael Brice-Sadler, and I have the privilege of serving as your moderator for tonight's important discussion. Tonight, we gather to hear from the candidates vying for an at-large position on the DC Council, where they will play a critical role in shaping the future of our nation's capital. The decisions made by these candidates will impact the lives of every district resident, and it's crucial that we have a clear understanding of their visions, plans, and qualifications. Before we proceed, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the significance of this event. The DC Council holds immense responsibility in representing the interests of our diverse communities, addressing pressing issues, and enacting policies that promote equity, justice, and progress. As a reminder, residents will have the opportunity to vote for 2 at-large council members in November. Throughout tonight's debate, we'll delve into a wide range of topics from affordable housing to public safety to transportation and beyond. We'll hear from the candidates about their ideas for addressing the challenges facing our city and their plans for building a brighter future for all residents. But before we begin, I want to emphasize the importance of civility and respect in tonight's proceedings. While debates are an opportunity for candidates to express their viewpoints and engage in healthy discourse, it's imperative that we maintain a respectful and constructive atmosphere throughout the evening. To our candidates, I encourage you to be concise yet thorough in your responses, to engage with your fellow candidates respectfully, and to focus on the issues that matter most to the people of Washington, D.C. I also want to go over the ground rules for tonight. Each candidate will be allowed a 60-second opening statement, 60 seconds responses to direct questions, 30 seconds for a rebuttal, and you can raise your hand if you want to do that, and a 60-second closing statement. With that, let's get started. I'll introduce the candidates and we'll begin the discussion. Thank you for joining us. Let's have a productive and enlightening debate. If you're watching us live, please use the hashtag DCDebates to leave us a question. Starting with the introductions, we have Robert White first. At-large council member Robert White graduated from Archbishop Carroll High School in Washington, D.C. and attended St. Mary's College of Maryland, earning degrees in philosophy and political science. He completed additional studies at Oxford University in England and the Gambia, West Africa. Robert earned his law degree from the American University Washington College of Law. In 2008, Robert went to the United States Congress to serve as a legislative counsel to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. He served as a lead staff member on the congressional oversight hearings focused on the district and played a key role in drafting legislation to loosen Congress's grip over the DC government in favor of greater autonomy and independence for Washingtonians. In 2014, Robert was tapped by Attorney General Carl A. Racine to serve as the first Director of Community Outreach for the DC Office of the Attorney General. In this role, Robert designed and executed a blueprint for community engagement with a focus on improving services and support for the city's most vulnerable residents. Robert and his wife Christy, an attorney with the U.S. Security Exchange Commission, reside in Ward 4 with their daughters Madison and Moreau and their rescue pit bull Roscoe. They attend St. Martin's Catholic Church. Now introducing at-large council member Christina Henderson. Her career has been guided by the principle that one zip code should not determine your opportunity for success. And Christina works every day to make this principle a reality for DC residents. Christina is known for her common sense approach to policy, a collaborative working style, and centering equity in her work. She considers herself to be a hard worker and effective legislator, securing legislative and budgetary wins to improve maternal and reproductive health, increase the pay and benefits for workers, fight food insecurity, advance public safety and safe streets, support small businesses, and more. Christina currently serves as the chair of the council's Committee on Health. Prior to her election in 2020, Christina provided counsel to the United States Senators, DC council members, and state and local education officials on an array of domestic policy issues which deeply impacts families and children. Christina received her BA in Political Science from Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and her Master's in Public Affairs from Princeton University. She lives in Petworth with her husband and 2 daughters. And lastly, we have Darryl Moch. Darryl currently serves as chair of the DC Statehood Green Party in Washington, D.C., and national co-chair of the U.S. Green Party. Darryl previously ran for D.C. City Council chair and at-large for the D.C. Statehood Green Party. He has served as an advisor to campaigns and candidates in various parts of the country, locally, regional, and nationally. Darryl's a proud Ward 7 resident and homeowner, single father, and senior care provider. Darryl is very familiar with the process of working with government, building collective efforts with diverse people, organizations, and groups across the region and nation. He says government should be for the people, serve the people, and be accountable to the people. Darryl serves as a consultant, activist, advocate, performance artist, psychotherapist, and is an ordained minister serving at the United Church of Christ. His art, activism, and advocacy work is rooted in social justice, equality, and quality of life issues for African American and BIPOC communities, children, youth, families, LGBTQ communities, people living with mental and physical challenges, the homeless, and more. And with that, let's jump into our opening statements. Darryl, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you so much, Michael. My name is Darryl Moch, and I'm running for City Council at large. I'm running because I believe that it is time for us to once again ensure that we're bringing the council to the people and bringing the people to the council. My intention is to be the voice of the people on the council, with my heart, with my mind, and with my spirit. Mainly with the voice. Being a voice where there has been very little place, for those across the district where everyone needs to be heard, everyone needs to be respected. I'm concerned about the issues that face our community, issues that deal with our violence, deal with public child poverty, education, things that are dealing with our quality of life for everyone, for residents, housing, and access to health care. I'm concerned very much about statehood, that if we were a state, if we were the Douglas Commonwealth, we would be able to do so much more for our communities. And so I'm here to represent our communities across all of the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Michael, and good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Office of Campaign Finance for hosting this debate, to my fellow candidates for joining this evening. I'm one of the at-large council members. I ran 4 years ago because I felt as though we needed more council members who were focused on making DC more equitable. I grew up as a military kid, moved around from zip code to zip code. And what I found in DC is that it's not really living up to even the principle that my mom instilled in me, that regardless of your zip code, it shouldn't determine your opportunity for success. And every day for the past 4 years, I've been working on policies to make that a reality, whether it be on increasing or improving access to health care for individuals, working on improving traffic safety and infrastructure around public transit, or public safety and justice. And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to discuss the policy issues this evening and hope that I get another vote for another 4 years.
Thank you. Councilmember Robert White, your opening statement, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Good evening, residents. Thank you to the Office of Campaign Finance and to our moderator. I am a fifth-generation Washingtonian and so proud to be able to serve the city that I love as a council member. As a member of our community, no matter where I am, whether it's a hair salon in Ward 8 or a grocery store in Ward 1, there are two things that I hear almost every day: concerns about public safety and about housing. On the issue of public safety, I've prioritized enforcement, making sure that when residents call 911 in an emergency, they actually get an answer. Making sure that when people commit violent crimes against our residents, we have a crime lab that can actually provide prosecutors with the information they need to hold people accountable. On housing, I've worked to make sure we are spreading affordable housing across our entire city, not continuing to just put it all in the same old places. And I've reformed the DC Housing Authority, ushering in a new board and new leadership so we can finally see changes in our public housing. But we have more work to do, so I'm asking for your vote because I've been effective with your vote thus far, and I have a vision for where we can go as a city.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Now we'll jump right into the questions, and we're going to start with that very timely topic that you just raised, housing. And I'll start with you with this first question, Councilmember White. Roughly 2,000 families are expected to be terminated from the city's rapid rehousing program, which has been intended as a one-year program to house homeless families. But many of the families have been in the program for twice that length of time or more, since many of them have not been able to find affordable market rate rent. Council members have been critical of the situation, but looking long-term, do you believe changes should be made to the rapid rehousing program? And if so, what changes? Starting with you, Councilmember White.
Yes. Housing is an issue near and dear to me. I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian, but my father can see the District of Columbia from his balcony in Maryland, but cannot afford to live here. So I know how important it is to make sure our residents can remain housed. I have been frustrated with the rapid rehousing program, which is well-intentioned, but it is broken. We cannot continue to put families into a program assuming they're going to be able to pay market rate rent when we know that most jobs, especially entry-level jobs, are not paying that level of rent. So rather than cycling families through a broken system, support those families until they are stabilized and don't put new families into this cycle. That's what I'm fighting to do. And I am frustrated that the mayor continues to put up roadblock after roadblock for us trying to help families. We don't need any more excuses. We need action. That's what I've demanded from the council. We have developed solutions to this, and the primary change that I'm going to make on rapid rehousing is to make sure we only put people in that program that are likely to succeed on the back end.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember White. Councilmember Henderson, same question for you.
Thank you for that question. I think the ideals and goals when we first started rapid rehousing were good ones. It was an opportunity to quickly ensure that families can get into housing and not have to go into shelter. And what was supposed to happen was once they concluded the program, either they were going to be able to afford to pay the market rent or whatever the rents were, or we were going to basically staple a voucher to their exit interview. That latter didn't happen. We haven't been stapling the vouchers or providing the vouchers that allow for families to successfully, seamlessly transition. And so I definitely think that I think we've known for several years that rapid rehousing needed some types of reform. And it's unfortunate that these families are being caught in the gap here on our failure to act quickly enough. But I feel like in the next coming council period, this has to be at the top of our list. Housing has to be at the top of our list, whether it's rapid rehousing, whether it's looking at ERAP, or just overall how do folks afford to purchase homes here in the district, and folks who have homes get to keep them.
Thank you. Mr. Moch.
Thank you. So what we need in terms of housing is not just a program, not just something that's intended to be a limited fix to a problem that has been longstanding in our state. What we need are opportunities and processes that help people to get in and maintain good housing and to be able to maintain their ability to stay in their housing. We need to create opportunities for us to repurpose vacant properties and turn them into the kinds of housing and homes that people can live in across the district. We need to also expand rent controls so that we can make sure that people can continue to live in the state where they live. People that have lived here forever are not able to stay here, and that should be a crime. We need to make sure that we are prioritizing housing as a human right and making sure that we're putting things into place to make sure that that can happen. We need to work with the people for whom these needs are there so that they can help us solve the problem. They have answers. We need to listen to them too.
Thank you. When we look at some rapidly developing areas of the city, Anacostia, for example, I frequently hear from longtime residents that they welcome the attention, the new development, but there's this fear about what happens as property values increase. They've seen families in some cases have to leave the city, and they're worried the same thing's going to happen again. To them, I should say. How can the city balance this? How can it balance development and smart growth without displacing longtime residents or vulnerable residents or those with low incomes? I'll start with you, Councilmember Henderson, on this one.
Thanks for that question. I think the displacement question is one that's always on the top of folks' mind, particularly in cities like ours. It doesn't mean that the new development doesn't come, but that the government needs to be more intentional in terms of the work that we're doing on housing preservation. I introduced legislation, for instance, to expand the Community Land Trust Program, which would essentially maintain homes or a suite of homes in affordability for perpetuity for families to be able to afford. And I'm hoping that we are able to move that forward. There's the Housing Preservation Fund, which unfortunately we haven't had the opportunity to invest as much money as we need to in those programs. But when I talk to some families for whom it's a home that maybe it was your grandma's home, you want to keep it in the family, but the repairs and the upkeep are too expensive for you to even get over that hurdle. It's really hard to get access to capital from banks to do those types of repairs. The Housing Preservation Fund is a great opportunity for us to be able to help those local families keep those homes in their family for perpetuity as well.
Thank you. Mr. Moch, same question.
Yeah. I think the first thing that the district government has to do is to keep its promises, which it has historically not done. We have told people that we're going to renovate, we're going to redevelop, and you can come back, and they have not been allowed to come back. We have changed what it means to have an affordable place to live by changing what's in the property and how the property is developed, so it becomes something that is not affordable for those people that once lived there with the same jobs and the same salaries that cannot return to those properties. So we need to make sure that once again we're making housing a priority and that we are working with people to be able to stay in the housing in the ways in which it makes sense for them, to be able to retain their properties and to be able to return to those properties. We need to work with development to ensure that we are making sure that spaces are available at the rate that's affordable, not the market rate, because the market fluctuates and can change based on what we do in that area. We need to make it affordable for people, and that is not necessarily set by the margins of what the market will allow.
Thank you. Councilmember White, same question for you. What can the council do to ensure that residents aren't displaced?
Thank you for this question. Displacement is something I know quite a bit about here in DC. My family house is on 15th Street Northwest. Myself, my dad, his siblings, all my cousins lived there at some point in our lives. But that neighborhood doesn't look today anything like it looked when I was growing up, because as we saw gentrification, we saw displacement of most of those families. Now, when we talk about gentrification, people aren't mad at new restaurants coming, new dry cleaners. What I'm mad about is the displacement of residents. So I also have family in historic Anacostia on 15th Street Southeast. And when we see changes in 15th Street Southeast, shame on us if we don't make the correct fixes so that we can avoid the type of displacement that we saw on 15th Street Northwest. That means that for equity purposes, we have to be open to changes in our property tax system, to assistance helping people fix up their homes, all to the end of making sure that even as these communities change and get the amenities that people have been asking for decades, they can stay there long enough to see it.
Thank you. Going to transition topics a bit into the budget and finances. DC just went through another austere budget cycle with a back and forth between the Bowser administration and the council over cuts to social services. We've seen this dynamic over the past few years where the mayor has proposed cuts to social services that grew during the pandemic, often through federal funding, and then said we need to pare it back. I think about the emergency rental assistance program, for example, to balance the city's budget, only for the council then come later and reverse those cuts. So is there a reason to think this won't be an issue moving forward? There was a lot of talk at the end of the budget cycle about needing to come together with the Bowser administration to prevent this type of budget battle from happening, to make sure we're investing in folks who need these social services while managing the city's finances all at the same time. How do you do that? I'll start with you, Mr. Moch.
Thank you, Michael. there are very easy answers to some of this. Some of it is people sitting down together in a room and putting politics aside and not worrying about the next election, but worrying about what do we need to do for people today. I'm a firm believer that if you do what's right for the people today, when it comes time for re-election, they'll remember that, right? But they also will remember when you didn't do that. And so that's part of the problem, is that we have people constantly jockeying for positions in power and using the budget. We cannot continue to balance the budget of our state on the backs of the people. We need to do things that expand the opportunity to bring more income in, bringing more businesses into the district, to turn district into a world-class city, as it should be, a world-class state, and also making sure that we are collecting the revenue from the large developers, corporations, and people with the highest incomes to be able to offset the needs for the people at the other ends of the spectrum. So we have to be able to balance the budget in a way that makes sure that everyone is equitably getting treated and getting served with the services and the programs that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember White, how do we balance the high demand for social services in the city with the realities of our budget and finances?
Look, the reality is that most jurisdictions would give an arm and a leg to have a $22 billion budget to serve 700,000 people. So the issue is that we do have enough money, but we have to spend it better. What I have proposed and what I'm trying to push through the finish line is, one, a financial performance review, looking at states like Delaware and Pennsylvania that have gone through austere times but found hundreds of millions of dollars by finding efficiencies. Now, those efforts are usually led by a governor. Since our mayor isn't going to lead it, I'm leading it. But I know that we can find more money to serve more residents without asking residents for a single more dime. We also need to look at what other states are doing, creating sunset commissions. If we created programs or agencies 15 years ago and they're no longer serving their initial purpose, that money has to go into other programs or back into the pockets of residents. This notion that we cannot afford to create safety nets in a city with $22 billion is ridiculous. That is a knock on our efficiency and our leadership, not a knock on whether or not we have enough money.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, do you agree with Councilmember White that it's possible to address this without raising taxes for their own residents or asking taxpayers to pay more?
I'm not sure. I think if you look at the numbers from the OCFO, and you look at the realities of where our commercial marketplace is downtown, revenues are going down. What we are going to have available to us is not necessarily going to be $22 billion in the future. And, you know, this was a very difficult budget cycle. There were programs that we all, fought for that were on the chopping block. For me, pay equity, which was the funding for early childhood educators. But the mayor sent a letter to the council when she didn't sign the budget and said, I want to work with you. And I followed up a couple of weeks later and said, what does that look like? Because right now, the way that we do budgets, nobody talks to each other until we get to the very end of the process. No one sets priorities or goals. And if we're going to be going through these tough times, then I think we need to have a decision at the front end. What are the 5, 6, or 10 things that we're going to do? What are we going to say? All right, we're going to protect education, we're going to protect safety net. We could do those things, but I feel like we're not on one band, one sound right now. We're on everybody sending out their own press releases for their own little problems. And I feel like there needs to be leadership that brings everybody together to have those conversations.
Did you get a response to that letter?
Oh, I went in person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a great meeting.
Good. Moving topics once again. As you know, a federal indictment has accused Ward 8 Councilmember Trayon White of accepting bribes to try and influence city government contracts. White has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent until proven guilty. He is also expected to be on the ballot in November as Ward 8's Democratic nominee. But the nature of the allegations have been troubling for many residents in and outside of Ward 8. So my question is this: how can the council restore residents' trust considering the nature of these allegations? And Councilmember White, I'll start with you.
This is an issue, and I'm troubled as well as a resident, and I'm disappointed. I worked on Capitol Hill 10 years ago for Congresswoman Norton, the last time we saw something like this. And what I saw up close behind the scenes was the way that issues like this impact the district when we need our friends to stand behind us, and they're reticent because they don't want to be associated with issues in our city. This week, I supported and will serve on the ad hoc committee that's leading the investigation. Residents need us to run that investigation thoroughly, and we're going to make a decision on the outcome after we've done the work. But if we jump ahead, then we will hurt trust because residents won't believe the outcome. We also need to be very, very conscious and honest about the fact that if Councilmember Trayon White is not convicted, he could run again. So we have a lot of complex issues in front of us that we have to work through. And so as much as myself and many residents want us to get to a conclusion quickly, it is best that we get to a good, thorough conclusion that people have faith in.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, same question for you. How do you restore trust among residents?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and this whole situation is troubling, and I feel like district residents are kind of put in a pickle because the last time, or any other time that this has happened, where we've had a member who is elected who has been arrested or indicted, they've resigned within 48 to 72 hours after that has happened, and that hasn't happened in this particular case. But in terms of restoring the particular trust, I think back to the 1976 DNC speech for Barbara Jordan. I named my daughter after Barbara Jordan, and I went back and read that. And she has a part where she talks about more is required of public officials, more is required of the public trust. And so I'm going to keep doing my job. The ad hoc committee I'm serving on with Councilmember Robert White, and we're going to go through the investigation piece. But I've also been calling on the mayor's office to do a complete contract review of every single agency that was mentioned in those allegations to ensure that we are making sure that our contracting and procurement processes are also following the law and being held up in that way.
Mr. Moch, same question.
Yes, thanks again for the question, I assumed it would come up. The biggest challenge that I think we face is accountability. We must make sure that our elected officials recognize that they're hired to do a job, and that we as the people will hold them accountable, and that they are accountable to and for us. And so I think at the end of the day, what we need to do is follow the process that the council is following to make sure that we are being accountable, that we're looking at all the things that need to be looked at, and that we are maintaining a relationship with the trust. If you want to have trust with the people, go with the people where the people are. Talk to them, be around them, hear what their concerns are. Take those concerns up when you're doing your deliberations and when you're having the investigation. Look into what the people are concerned about so you can respond to the concerns that the people have. They will trust you when you act on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. A follow-up on this for our incumbent lawmakers. Councilmember Henderson, what steps have you taken so far in Ward 8 to make sure residents there know, as an at-large council member who represents the whole city, you're also there for them in this moment where maybe leadership's a little bit unstable?
Yeah, there have been a couple of community groups who have set up meetings to have conversations with folks. I've attended one of those Zooms. I was in Ward 8 a couple of weeks ago talking to the folks from the AARP. This also came up as well. I always like to remind people, you have always had 6 council members. You have your ward member, but you have always had 4 at-large members and the chairman of the council who represent you as well, and will continue to be there as we go through this process, and we hope that they will lean on us.
Councilmember White, how have you changed your approach in Ward 8 in the aftermath of the allegations against Councilmember Trayon White?
For as long as I've been an at-large council member, I've made a point to be in Ward 8 more than any other ward, including the ward that I live in. But knowing that we all have to step up more in this issue, I picked up a school supply drive after one was canceled, unfortunately, by the council member's office. I've attended several community meetings where they asked me to come both as a lawyer and a council member to talk to residents in plain language about what's at stake and what the possible outcomes are. I've gone to more events at public housing residents in Ward 8 and even to barbershops, just making sure I'm present as much as possible so that people in Ward 8 who didn't do anything wrong here don't feel like they are losing out because of something that, again, they didn't cause.
Mr. Moch, a rebuttal?
Yeah, I just want to appreciate what the council members have done in their presence. But unfortunately, Councilmember Henderson, we don't always feel we have 6 people. Sometimes we might have 3, we sometimes have 2. And if we want to make a change in that, we've got to make sure that we get people who are going to be in office that are going to be representing all of the district and not just certain pockets of the district or certain places where people donate more. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Moch. Next question, I'm going to turn topics again toward public safety. Police staffing is a timely topic, and the total number of officers in the city has been a frequent policy debate for the past few election cycles. The department currently has about 3,100 sworn officers. That's a significant drop from 2014, where that number was closer to 3,900. A recent audit from DC Auditor Kathy Patterson recommended boosting the number of detectives on the force, but concluded that there were enough officers assigned to patrol duties. But police department leaders and some lawmakers have said in recent years that reduced staffing has been a threat to public safety, and the department said in response to Patterson's audit that her conclusions were, quote, at odds with reality, pointing to crime concerns from residents and businesses. So my question is this: Does DC have enough patrol officers, and what was your takeaway from Patterson's audit? And I'll start with you, Mr. Moch.
I don't think DC has enough patrol officers, but I think that what the patrol officers we have need to do are, again, be in relationship with the communities in which they police and serve. And so when you are in those spaces, when people know you and they trust you, we see this all the time on different news medias and other places where police officers are doing things in the community and the people know them, they're not afraid of them, and they will call on them and they will talk to them and they can get the support that they need. I think we need to change the way policing is done in the District of Columbia to open it up to a place where people are feeling connected to the police and the police are serving them in a way that is bringing them the quality of life that they deserve. I think those are the key elements. And so yes, we can increase the numbers, but increasing the numbers and not changing how we do it isn't going to make it better. We can reduce the numbers and still not changing the way we do it isn't going to make it better. What's going to make it better is the police being a part of the community and the community being a part of the police force and having accountability to police officers when they go over the line.
Thank you. Councilmember White, does DC have enough patrol officers? Did you agree with the auditor's findings?
The auditor's report said something I very much agree with, that we can't keep throwing police at the problem and expect a different outcome. Has not worked. It never will work. This report, prepared not really by the auditor, but by experienced police chiefs and other public safety professionals, said that we need to improve our strategies and coordination. So there's no doubt that police right now are stretched too thin. What the auditor's report and these public safety experts said is that there are strategies we can take to deploy our resources better, and that's what we have to do. We don't have enough police if we keep asking police to do things that don't require police. They don't have to be the first line of defense for traffic safety stops. They should not be the first line of defense for mental health issues. We have to do more around prevention, and we have to continue to support our violence intervention program. If we run an ecosystem like that and optimize our operations in our force, then yes, we have enough police.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, same question. Does DC have enough patrol officers?
I would encourage everyone to actually read the auditor's report. I know it's over 400 pages, but the executive summary is smaller. It's more bite-sized for folks. One of the things that they talk about in there was that there was insufficient data, right? And I feel like that has to color some of the remarks. And so even though there are saying over 3,000 sworn officers, when you actually look at the number of patrol and investigators, we're less than 2,000. And so when I think about what I hear from officers and I think about how much we have spent in this city on overtime, because we get reports on overtime every month as well, it tells me something's not working. There's a mismatch in terms of the number that we have and the needs that we have, particularly especially what we're going to need coming up in the next year. And I'm not saying that we're going to resolve all of these things. I appreciate that the chief has reached out to federal partners to ask them to do more in their enclave areas, right? National Park Service or the Secret Service around the White House, to be able to have our patrol officers be in neighborhoods and serving folks. But I think that if we're going to keep spending millions and millions of dollars on overtime, then that's telling me that there's something kind of a mismatch in terms of what we have versus what we need.
Thank you. And let's stick with public safety. In the spring, there was a lot of attention on the omnibus crime bill passed by the council, which, among other things, increased penalties for gun possession, expanded pretrial detention, and reintroduced drug-free zones. That bill came off a historic crime spike last year. This year, so far, violent crime is down 35%. What's worked that led to this reduction? Can you attribute it to anything in the omnibus legislation, or is it something else? Please be specific in your answer. I'll start with Councilmember White.
Thank you for this question. At the end of the day, what residents want is to feel safe. I remember growing up in DC in the 80s and 90s during the height of our violent crime area, being less than 10 years old and seeing my first drive-by shooting. Walking up the street to see a young man from the neighborhood at the same time that his mother arrived at the scene to see that it was her son laying dead on the ground. And I will never forget the sound of her crying. We have an obligation to make our city safe and to keep our city safe. Now, many parts of that public safety bill were parts that I wrote. There were parts of that bill that I think were more to pacify people than good policy. For instance, drug-free zones. We do have an issue with drugs being used in public, but guess what? It's already illegal. Everywhere in the city is a drug-free zone. So I don't like policy that pacifies. I like policy that works. One thing we know is that violent crime started to go down before we passed that bill. And so I think it sent an important message that the council and the mayor were on the same page, taking public safety seriously, but we can't say that it was directly because of that bill. So we've got to keep our foot on the gas there because crime has gone down, but we still have work to do. People still don't feel safe.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, what's your observation here?
I think you're always going to find difficulty in finding something that's a direct correlation. But what I do think, based on the conversations, all the conversations that were had around that bill, probably the biggest difference is a change in terms of accountability, particularly on the court side of things. A year ago, we had a public safety summit, and I asked the U.S. attorney, why are we not prosecuting misdemeanors? Why are there so many cases for which you are not pursuing that we are going no paper? And those individuals are now being bolstered and thinking, well, if I'm not going to get caught, if nobody's going to do anything about it, then I'm going to keep going further and further. And we had examples of that. For instance, we had several press releases of individuals who were caught for carjackings. And it wasn't just for a single. When you looked at the rap sheet, they were also being hit for 6 and 7 other carjackings at the exact same time. That tells me that was a lack of accountability that was going on there. But I think separate from that too, we've also changed our approach in engaging young people, our tweens, our 11 to 13-year-olds who are engaging in some of these behaviors. We've launched some new programs that I feel like have engaged them. And so I think it's a multi-phase approach.
Thank you. Mr. Moch, what have you observed from the outside?
I think that I've worked in the last year or so with some violence interrupter programs in the area I live in, Ward 7, and I've been engaged with those programs across the district. And so I think that the change is the emphasis that has been placed on those kinds of programs that are reaching into communities and working with young people. And it's not just young people that are where crime is happening, right? But we're reaching into that segment of our community and pulling them out of the circumstances that lead to violence. I think in order to really address violence and make sure that people are safe, you have to address all the factors that lead to violence. And that is not what happens with the omnibus bill. We throw some Band-Aids at some things and hope that it's going to work instead of addressing the real reasons why people are out committing crime, what they're hungry for, what they're needing, what they're lacking in mental health support and education and opportunities. So these are the things that we need to begin to address if we want to continue to bring the crime rates down.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the OUC, DC's 911 call center. For those who don't know, this agency has had a lot of problems over the years and has been an express focus of the council, especially as of late. Can you just diagnose for me what is the biggest issue or biggest challenge facing DC's 911 call center right now, and what can the council do about it? Councilmember Henderson, I'll start with you.
It's a litany, but we're working on it. I would say probably the biggest one right now is staffing. I'm proud to have worked with the Firefighters Union on a bill to try to increase capacity at OUC by having retired firefighters and police officers be able to work at OUC without having a penalty on their annuity and their pensions. And we've already seen some retired firefighters who are able to, who have joined OUC and are able to bring their years of expertise to that work. It's a difficult job. And frankly, we don't treat, I feel, our 911 callers as emergency responders. They're making entry-level pay, and they're dealing with the most stressful of moments for folks. I think the other thing that we have to do and get better on is educating the public on when is the appropriate time to call 911 versus what are some other means to handle particular issues in the community. And that's on us. We have to do better about our crisis response unit, particularly out of the Department of Behavioral Health. Not everything requires a police officer or fire and EMS. There are trained individuals who can help someone if they're in a mental health crisis, and that is a number that's separate from 911, but I don't feel like we've done our job educating the public on that.
Thank you. Mr. Moch, how do we fix DC's 911 call center?
So I appreciate what Councilman Henderson is saying, that the folks who work in 911 are doing hard work. And they're doing stressful work. If I work in the mental health field also and have worked, and I know that taking those calls, I worked at a call center in Georgia, taking those calls of people who are planning to commit suicide or are stressed out for whatever the reasons are, or in a crisis, that is a lot on someone to have to handle. We have to be able to handle and support our staff better, right? So more staffing, better hours, better pay always works better for people. Getting paid a little bit better, always a good thing, right? But the biggest thing is that people just don't believe that there's a change. And so they're not calling 911 or calling other services and getting other support until the crisis is out of control. We have to find other ways to involve other programs, other jurisdictions, other states and cities. In Portland, Oregon, there are programs that they're doing that change the nature of who the responders are, who's being called. There are programs being piloted all around the country. We're just thinking that we can keep doing the same thing. We have to take a look at what other people are doing and apply some of those techniques to make something change for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
I want to make sure as we use this like technical term, a 911 call center, we are on the same page about what's happening. Emergencies are happening in this city, oftentimes life and death. People are picking up the phone, dialing 911 with the expectation that they're going to get first responders in time, and they are being left on hold. People are losing their lives. People are getting medical injuries unnecessarily. This issue, the diagnosis, is leadership and accountability. There's no way around it. There are many other 911 centers around the country that are working fine. Now, if the leadership at the OUC now can't do it, then we need new leadership. What I have proposed and what I'm fighting for is a full management overhaul similar to what we did with fire and EMS years ago when they got sued for similar issues. The process they used there worked. It happened in 90 days. Right now, we have to act with a sense of urgency, so that's what I'm fighting for us to do.
Thank you, Councilmember. Are you suggesting a new director for the agency, or could you elaborate more on what you're saying?
I think the Mayor Bowser needs to be more vocal in this. We've heard a lot from the council. We have not heard a lot from the mayor. That's where leadership starts and ends. And if the director of our 911 call center can't bring about changes in 90 days, then we need to bring in somebody who can.
Thank you. I'm going to pause to change things up a little bit. We're going to do a few yes or no questions so you can guess. The collective groan, guys. Come on, it's just a few. It's just a few.
Maybe is a good answer. Sometimes.
I'm going to start.
No is a complete sentence.
Right, it is.
Well, I'm going to start with one I know you all have been asked before. Do you support the use of taxpayer dollars to finance a new stadium at RFK?
No.
No. Thumbs down if it's no. Thumbs up. Okay. Should parents with chronically truant children be subject to potential prosecution by the DC Attorney General? Thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no.
I'd love to talk more about this, but no.
There's much more to it than that, yes and no.
Do you support Initiative 83, which would open up the city's primary elections to independent voters and introduce ranked choice voting to the city?
I'm the independent on the.
No.
So we got a mixed result here, so maybe we stick with this one. Councilmember White, you were a thumbs down.
Yeah.
Could you explain why?
Yeah, so in the at-large race, in this election, in the general election, people get multiple votes. And you can look back as far as you want, and what you will find is that people in DC overwhelmingly don't use their second vote. New York City is ahead of us on ranked choice voting, and what you see is an economic disparity in the people who use their multiple votes. So that leaves us with an equity question that we have to answer. I very much commend the folks behind Initiative 83, the desire to see elections run and won on ideas. I like that, I support that, but I think Initiative 83 is intended to get us to a place that I don't think it's going to get us to, and leaves us with a real equity issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. You're obviously for Initiative 83. Could you explain why?
Yeah, there are two components to it. So the first, in terms of ranked choice voting, I feel like if our elections are continue to be as competitive as they are, then voters deserve a better way to be able to express their vote, where someone actually has to receive 50% plus one in order to be elected. Everyone recalls 2020, there were 24 people on the ballot for this particular race. That was a lot for voters to have to deal with. And so I feel like ranked choice voting is an excellent way for us to mitigate that. And with proper education, multiple jurisdictions who have done this shows that ranked choice voting can actually be successful. The other part about the open primaries for independents, now I'm an independent, so this is specific to me, but there are lots of elections for which my taxpayer dollars are funding, but I can't actually participate in. When it comes to the mayor's race, when it comes to the attorney general race, I don't really have a say in what's happening in the leadership in those races. And so I feel like this would give an opportunity for those candidates to have to speak to the entire city and not just a few.
Thank you. Mr. Moch.
So this is a mixed question to me, right? So I'm completely for ranked choice voting and instant runoff voting. I'm not for open primaries. I think the reason is because in order to make sure that you're getting the candidates that you want to be able to choose, people should be able to work within their party structure to do whatever that process is. Now, I do think that we should do something different with independents so that there's an opportunity for them in the primary to be engaged in that process and be involved in that conversation. So I think that's a miss that we have going on. But I do think that we need to keep the sanctity of the ability of parties to do what they do and not have people jumping from place to place. Because right now what we have is we have people that if you don't win in one area will well, not so much this easy, but if you don't win one year in one area, you just run as an independent and you're really something else. So for many, many years on our council, the majority of the folks on the council are really from one party, except for maybe one or two, and several of them were independents, but they really weren't independents. And so you don't get an opportunity for people like me from a third party, from the second largest party in this district, to be able to represent ourselves and be taken seriously and be able to be elected. So that's why I'm here, and I hope you're liking what you hear. You'll make me one of your two choices.
Thank you, Mr. Moch. We have two rebuttals, so I'm going to start with you, Councilmember Henderson, 30 seconds.
So I happen to go to college in a state that has open primaries, South Carolina, and guess what happened? They still elect Republicans. But on the local side of things, people have an opportunity to pick a candidate that they feel best represents them on issues related to local issues. And I would also say this, right? If you don't want independents to participate in the party elections, that's fine. The party should then pay for that election, as the Republicans do.
Councilmember White.
I think I want to be careful about how far we go down an anti-democratic road, and here's what I mean by it. The reason that we have two non-Democrats in the at-large seats is because when Congress gave DC home rule, they said they put a requirement that doesn't exist on any other Democratic area in this country. They said you cannot vote for who you want. You have to elect people from the non-majority party. This was Republicans' ways of trying to get Republicans in our council. So if we want an effort for reform, I think we need to go back to Congress and say, let us elect who we want to elect.
Interesting. Thank you for that. That was really interesting. We'll see what the voters have to say in the fall. Shifting gears a little bit to education. The latest round of testing data show that students have still not recovered from the pandemic and are performing in reading and math at about the same level they did a year ago. What do schools need to do to move this needle further, and how will you ensure that happens? Start with you, Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks for that question. I have two young kids who are in DC public schools now. They're not at the testing level, but I certainly saw the impacts of the pandemic and the early childhood piece of things. And I don't feel like we've fully been able to grasp what the impact of that was on our children in terms of their learning abilities. But in terms of getting folks back on track, I think the responsibility of the council is to provide the resources that schools need, the resources that teachers need to be able to provide rigorous, effective, and innovative lesson plans to engage those young learners. There might be some who need additional time, and so we have invested in high impact tutoring. I think we're not entirely, I would say the case is not fully closed on whether or not that is the panacea in terms of the work that we need to be doing. But I do feel like we need to be providing more engaging content to bring young people in. You don't only have to learn math and reading from math class and reading class. For some kids, they might learn math through art or music. For other kids, it might be through history and social studies. And so I don't want us to lean into just math and reading simply because we're trying to raise a test score, when you might be able to reach children in other ways.
Right, thank you. Mr. Moch, how do we fix this?
So really the answer is letting the education professionals do what education professionals do. We let lawyers do what lawyers do. We let doctors do what doctors do. We tell teachers who are education professionals what they should do, instead of asking them, what is the best practice? What are the kinds of things that you think need to happen for your classroom, for your students this year? Or for all students if you're looking at them across the board in school systems or in a particular area, right? What do we need to do that's going to enhance the educational process? I agree that other things like intramurals and arts, I'm an artist, and so intramurals and artists and all that stuff is how I learn, is how I thrive, right? And so I think there are a lot of people that don't just simply learn in the simple reading and math way, but they can do all of those things if we engage them in new creative ways. Sciences can help people to learn to read and to understand and use computations. So we can do this in a whole different way, but we need to let the education professionals do what they do, which is be professionals and teach our young people and our adults. Education goes across the lifespan.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
Long before I was in law school and studying at Oxford University, I was a long-time failing student because I did not learn the way most of my peers learned. Now I'm the dad of two little girls, and both those little girls learn differently. They're incredibly talented, but they learn differently. Too often we teach to a common denominator that really doesn't exist. And I think that if anything that we've learned from the pandemic, we have to create different educational opportunities and environments for our young people based on how they learn. We also keep hearing from young people that they need more mental health supports. Doesn't matter how smart these young people are, if they don't have mental health supports, they are generally not going to thrive in the classroom. And we need to continue to expand and hold accountability around our tutoring programs to help our young people catch up. The last thing I would say is that a lot of our young people are telling us that they're not planning to go to college. So I'm working on a vast expansion of trade and vocational education so those young people still know that they can have good paying careers. And if we don't turn that corner, we're going to continue to see a lot more young people dropping out of school.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Sticking with education, Eagle Academy recently became the first charter school closure in several years in the district. The school closed less than a week before the school year was supposed to start. Enrollment had been falling for several years and the school failed to adjust. At one point, it was relying on credit cards to stay open. My question is this: do charter schools get enough oversight? And would the DC Charter School Board do what could the DC Charter School Board do to prevent taxpayer dollars from being wasted at struggling schools? Mr. Moch, you're first on this.
I knew you were going to come to me first. So the first part of your answer is obviously it's not working, right? So obviously there isn't enough regular oversight. We have a lot of these issues with schools, not just our public schools, but our charter schools and other schools that are having struggles, right? One of the first fixes, the money needs to follow the child. So the money that comes in, when a child leaves that school, it goes with them to the next school. So that school is not underfunded in order to be able to serve that particular child, right? The other issue is I think that we need to think out of the box and stop thinking about we have the charter board and the school board and the school board of education. We need to merge these entities. They are all collectively responsible for educating our young people. And so collectively, wherever you go, you should be getting the same quality, the same content, the same infusion of what needs to happen in order for you to learn well, right? So I think there's a way that we need to change the way we do it. We can do it because we're DC. So we don't have to do it like anyone else has done it. We don't have to keep doing it the way we've been doing it. We can choose to do it differently.
Thank you. Councilmember White, do we need to do it differently?
Yes, we need to do it differently. So charter schools say, give us your public money and mind your business. And when you don't do that, because that's not what happens with taxpayer money, when you don't do that, too often folks will jump to this rhetorical line of, well, you don't support charter schools. We need to move away from that nonsense. I very much support charter schools. I also believe that public money comes with an obligation that nobody else really gets around. And Eagle Academy was an exact example of why we need to make sure we have oversight. We need to be able to let them innovate, do what they need to do, take risks. I want to see them do that. But we also need to make sure we are accountable for public money and for our young people. And Eagle Academy showed what happens when we don't do that.
Councilmember Henderson?
I've asked Chairman Mendelson to call a hearing on this matter. Years ago, I was the committee director for the Committee on Education. So this isn't an issue about legislation. We already passed legislation years ago that gave the Public Charter School Board all the tools that they needed to have financial oversight and see the books of each and every one of the charter LEAs. And so I have questions about how it's possible that a charter school was able to get down to 6 days cash on hand and no one at the Public Charter School Board decided to raise the alarm prior to August. They had an opportunity in January to do something about this that would have allowed not just the hundreds of families who were displaced, but also the staff members and the teachers of Eagle Academy to make a different choice, get new jobs, and find new placements. And they chose not to do it, and basically, I feel like, put people's backs up against the walls by forcing that vote in August. And so I feel like we need to ask questions. Because again, this is not about legislation, this is about oversight. Part of the plan, or part of, I guess, the agreement rather, is the Public Charter School Board as the authorizing entity is supposed to be in these schools each and every day reviewing these documents, and with Eagle Academy, they failed, and we should ask why.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Switching gears once again to transportation, a recent Washington Post analysis found that since Mayor Bowser's Vision Zero initiative launched 10 years ago, the number of traffic fatalities in DC has risen in all but 2 years since 2014. And this year, DC is on track to hit 52 traffic deaths, which would match last year's 16-year high. What can be done differently with the laws we have to bring down traffic deaths? Is new legislation necessary beyond the STEER Act that will take effect next month? That bill allows the DC Attorney General to bring civil lawsuits against dangerous drivers. Is that enough, or do we need something more? Councilmember White, this one's for you first.
Some of this is an issue of laws. Some of it is an issue of infrastructure, and some of it is an issue of administration. So when you set goals and you are nowhere near reaching those goals, you have got to go back and look at your strategies and figure out why it's not working. We can't just keep setting these goals, releasing these shiny packets, doing ribbon cuttings, and then moving on about our business. We have to have more internal accountability about our goals. Infrastructure changes, some things that we know work, raise crosswalks. There are things that we can do in terms of infrastructure to make our city safer. We do fine the heck out of people who have traffic violations. I know that I get some of these in the mail. Many people I know do. But we've got to enforce it on the back end. We cannot let dangerous drivers continue to be on the road, whether they paid the tickets or not. We need to make sure we are identifying dangerous patterns and taking the appropriate steps before more people lose their lives.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, what needs to happen with Vision Zero?
Well, I had elements of bills that I wrote that was part of the STEER Act, and so I'm very much looking forward to its implementation on October 1. I also worked on the Safe Passage, Safe Streets for Students bill that put in new infrastructure requirements around schools. But I feel like we need to go further. And I've had this conversation with the director of the Department of Transportation. It can't just be about enforcement, but we also need to do the infrastructure changes. It breaks my heart, the idea that a young person who is walking home from school in the crosswalk now can't walk because a car swerved around, and then we find out they had thousands and thousands of dollars of tickets. I think that as a city, and not just as a city, as a region, I chair the Regional Transportation Planning Board, and we just had a conversation about this because everyone has made a declaration about Vision Zero, and we have been hustling backwards ever since. We have to have policies in place as a region to say, ghost bike ceremonies will not be the norm in our region. We have to say that 12-year-olds getting hit by cars in the crosswalks will not be the norm, and that requires leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Moch, please.
I agree. I think that the problem is not just about the legislation, right? It's also not just about what we've done to change the way our streets and the way our patterns happen. Some of those changes don't make sense. You go down some streets that are extremely busy streets, and now there's one lane, and there's a whole nother lane for bikes or someone, and not that we shouldn't have bike lanes, I do think we should, right? But in certain areas, we need to be able to maneuver how it's gonna be differently so that we don't back up traffic. People are trying to get to work, they're trying to get wherever they're going, and so they're not always thinking about the rush that they're doing, and so this is where the problem comes in, is because they're not able to maneuver the way they would need to maneuver, right? So we need to look at we need to review, revisit, and revise. So yeah, if there's legislation that isn't working, let's review it, let's revisit it, let's revise it. If there's legislation that's working, let's continue to expand the way that legislation works and fix those problem areas. We cannot rely just on tickets. Tickets alone are not an indicator of all bad behaviors. Some of us get tickets trying to get home because there's a light on our street and we're going 5 miles and more than we should. So it's not just about that, right? But there's way more to it, is my point, right? Is that there's a lot more to it than just whether or not people are getting tickets. It's also, can we give people and monitor people's behavior while they're driving beyond just the speeding tickets?
Councilmember Henderson, was that a rebuttal request? Or?
It was just a fact check. You don't get a ticket in the District of Columbia unless you're going over 11 over the speed limit.
I use the
no,
number.
I know, but people
you're
often,
right, you're
I
right.
was only going 3 over. I was only going 10 over. But if the school limit is 20 or 25 or 15, going 10 over could kill a kid.
Absolutely.
So people need to be mindful and slow down.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree with you too. Thank you. Thanks for the fact check.
We're winding down here, but I have a few more questions for you guys. Thanks for indulging me. Health, such an important topic, and life expectancy in the district. You have some really stark chasms depending on where you look in the city. Residents of Wards 7 and 8, their life expectancy is more than a decade shorter than some of their counterparts in other areas of the city. How would you improve preventative care and access to primary care providers, particularly in underserved Southeast Washington? Councilmember Henderson, I'll start with you here.
Well, as the chair of the Health Committee, this is something that I work on each and every day. The biggest one on our plate right now is getting Cedar Hill Regional Medical Center open on time and on its existing budget, which it will in March. And we've been engaging UHS and Cedar Hill in conversations around how they're engaging community providers, because I don't want us to have spent $400 million on a new facility and no one come because they don't trust that they're going to get quality care on the inside. In addition to that, we've opened up several urgent care centers. And one of the things we have been trying to do with providers is, number one, encouraging them to locate in neighborhoods and communities. If most people think about where they see their doctor's office, some of of it has been downtown because that's where folks had been. Now we have to think about it differently when folks are working from home. You should be able to walk down the street to a dentist if that's something that you want to do, as opposed to have to take 2 buses and a train in order to get care. Another thing that we have been working on is increasing provider reimbursements, because we have a large portion of our population who have Medicaid. We have a lot of folks who haven't been able to get in to see the specialty providers that they need because of that.
Thank you. Mr. Moch, how do we increase access to primary care, especially in underserved areas?
First of all, we have to go back to some things that we've had decades before, when we had hospitals and care in each of the wards and areas that we were. Now, we're doing much better with some of the places that are coming on tap in different places. I know in Ward 7, there are several new places that have been built up primarily under the Unity umbrella. However, there's still not enough services available to people that need them. So encouraging private practitioners to be involved to make sure that they get access to be able to serve folks that are on Medicaid and Medicare, and even with private insurances, being able to help make sure those things are possible for people in every area where people are living. So like Councilmember Henderson says, you don't have to go all the way across town to get the care that you want and the care that you need. We also need to make sure that the care that they're getting is care they trust and believe in. And so it's a campaign also for our healthcare industry to make sure that they're making it clear that they care and that they are there and that they are responsible for the care. And it's a relationship that has to be built with the community all over again. And it's been severed not because of the community, but because we took stuff out and away from them. So now we have to bring it back to them again.
Thank you. Councilmember White, what's your perspective here?
No one in our city should feel like they have to leave their neighborhood in order to have their health care needs addressed. Healthcare is an ecosystem. It means we need a world-class hospital in Ward 8, accessible to residents in Ward 7. It means that we need urgent care as part of that system, and it means that we need to incentivize attracting physicians to Ward 7 and 8 in particular. But it also means we need to push our insurers to cover mental health coverage, including therapy, because all people across the city need that access, and we need access to healthy foods. I remember growing up, both in the neighborhood I grew up in and when I spent my summers with family in Anacostia, spent a lot of time at the corner store. And what you didn't get then, and you still have a hard time finding now, is healthy foods. The things that are most accessible and least expensive are the things that are the worst for us. And we need to really think critically about what it would look like to get more healthy foods accessible and affordable for residents, particularly in underserved neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councilmember White. I'm going to ask you all one more question before we go to our closing statements. It's about the election and the presidential election specifically. Looking ahead to that election, former President Donald Trump has threatened to, quote, take over the district. Republicans in their platform have promised to, quote, reassert greater federal control over the city, end quote. And we've seen in recent years a spate of Republican-led congressional efforts to interfere in local DC laws and policies. So my question is this: Trump notwithstanding, what can the council learn from the past couple of years, especially where we've seen successful efforts in the House to overturn DC laws? Should the council be more mindful of potential interference when legislating? I'll start with you, Councilmember Henderson.
Well, I think I'm the only one up here who had the opportunity to work on the Hill when Trump was president the last time. And I can tell you, sometimes there are talking points and then sometimes there are actions. He has more talking points than actions, but the Republicans in the Congress, they have made certain efforts to engage in our local affairs like never before. I think the biggest thing, first and foremost, is that the district needs to be one band, one sound. If you lost on a budget fight, if you lost on a bill, don't go up to the Hill asking them to veto or overturn our laws, because this is how we're inviting the intrusion over and over and over again. I think the other thing that we have to do is get better in terms of our communication. While I wasn't elected to, provide fact sheets to the 535 members of Congress, the reality is I need them to understand what we're trying to do here, as opposed to just catching on to the talking points that they're hearing from the Republicans, which sound good and sound interesting, or sound catchy rather, as opposed to understanding what a bill really is versus what a bill really isn't. And we need to do better on communicating on our side.
Thank you. Councilmember White, does the council need to be more mindful of its legislating, considering the attempts at interference we've seen?
The District of Columbia are tax-paying residents of the United States of America, and we need to be able to act like it. Now, we have to remember that we have to be strategic because Congress does have oversight over the District of Columbia, unfortunately. And I worked for Congresswoman Norton for a number of years, and I was on the front lines of our budget debates over protecting our laws. But as much as we need to be strategic, we cannot let down the people who elected us to represent them, the things that we do with their taxpayer money. And the thing that we cannot do again is have DC officials, especially the mayor, when Mayor Bowser broke ranks on home rule. We cannot afford to do that in the District of Columbia. So the council needs to be strategic, the mayor needs to stay in line with the city, and we need to make sure we weather this storm. But the most thing we need to do is make sure Donald Trump is not elected president. I'm going to be going to Pennsylvania to knock on doors because I don't think we can afford that.
Thank you. Mr. Moch, what's your take on the congressional interference we've seen, and what should the council do moving forward when it's crafting bills?
Most important thing is we need to make sure that we make it very clear that we are not the Congress's playground. We're not your project. We are not your experiment. You do not get to come and play around here with the lives of the people of the District of Columbia or the Douglas Commonwealth and do things here that you wouldn't do in other places. We have to be able to stand firm on that. I agree that the mayor or the council member should not break ranks and go there. We need to figure it out together. We need to act like a state. States don't run to the federal government for help when they're having problems. We need to fix our problems. We need to act like a state. If we need to change the how we do things, change the names of things, the mayor gets to be a mayor and a governor, mayor, governor, whatever we need to do, we need to act like a state so that we can perform like a state, and then we will be treated that way. And then we need to push all across this nation to make sure that people in other jurisdictions understand that we are one of the last colonies of the United States on this continent, and that it is time for us to have representation. So stated number one is the first way to really address all of that interference with Congress, and we need to push for that.
Thank you. We're going to move to closing statements now. You'll have 1 minute. I'm going to do the reverse order where I started. So Councilmember White, we'll begin with you.
I want to thank my fellow candidates, to our moderator, and most importantly to residents who tuned in because you know how much leadership in our city matters. In my 2 terms on the council, I have worked to get things done for you, reforming agencies to make them work like public housing, like the Office of ANC, protecting women seeking abortions and protecting providers so that DC residents or those coming to DC for help in a time of complete insanity on the federal level have a place that will protect them. I've passed bills to expand early childhood education, create a free master's in social work program, and have made the District of Columbia the only jurisdiction in the nation to restore voting rights to all incarcerated people who never should have lost that right to begin with. I am in communities a lot, and what I hear over and over again is people who want the government to work. For government to work, we have to have council members who work and who get things done. That is what I've done in these 2 terms, and I'm asking for your vote to continue that work.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for being such a great moderator, and thank you to my fellow candidates for a good discussion. I'm excited about the future of the district. I think a lot of times people can get down on what is happening now, but I'm excited about the possibility because I'm a problem solver at heart. I like to look for solutions and work with others and try to get that done. The last 4 years, a lot has happened. And I've had an opportunity to work on a lot of different issues, a lot of different legislation, whether it be pay equity fund for early childhood educators. In January, we're finally expanding insurance coverage to cover IVF here in the District of Columbia. We have a new hospital in Ward 8 to open. I have a bill on long-term care that I'm excited to see implemented and get over the finish line. And so I'm asking for your vote. When you get your ballot, starting probably in October, you get 2 votes for at-large, and I hope that I get one of those. If you want to learn more about me and the work that I have done, please visit ChristinaHenderson.org to learn more about my campaign.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. And Mr. Moch, we're going to wrap up with you. Your closing statement.
Thank you, Michael, Office of Campaign Finance, and my colleagues here for being here, and all of you for being here, and for those of you that are joining in online. This has been an exciting opportunity to hear and talk and learn from me some of the things that you all are doing and how it's working, but also for you to recognize and hear that I am here because I am birthed out of the people. I am a community worker, community engagement person, and I'm working in the community constantly on various programs and activities and organizations and nonprofits. And so I'm talking to people all the time, and what I'm bringing to this race and to this campaign is an opportunity for the voices of all of those people who feel often that you're unheard and not recognized and not responded to. I'm offering to be that voice for you. I'm asking you to hire me to be your voice, and that together we can do this job together and bring what you need back to the council and bring the council back to you. We want to talk about statehood. We want to work on violence and interrupting violence. We want to talk about ending child poverty and increasing educational opportunities across the lifespan. We want to talk about quality of life for all people. So I'm asking you this year to make me one of your two choices. I'm Darryl Moch.
Thank you, Mr. Moch, and thank you to all of our candidates. That was a really robust and lively discussion. Election Day is November 5th. The Board of Elections will start sending out ballots on September 30th to all registered voters. Ballot drop boxes open October 11th, and early voting begins October 28th and lasts through November 3rd. Thank you and good night.